The story begins with a boy who was not born with privilege or comfort. His life was surrounded by limits, financial struggles at home, constant doubts from people around him, and an environment where dreaming big was seen as foolish. Every time he tried to share his vision of becoming someone greater, someone would remind him of his flaws. "You're too young. You don't have enough resources. People like us don't succeed." These voices echoed in his mind, making excuses sound like the safest path. Excuses became easy to hold on to. Whenever he failed an exam, he told himself, "I didn't have the right books." Whenever he lost in a competition, he whispered, "Others are more talented." Whenever life pushed him down, he convinced himself, "It's not my fault, I'm just unlucky." For a while, these excuses became his shield, protecting him from the pain of trying and failing again. But slowly, that same shield started turning into a heavy chain. Inside, the boy carried dreams bigger than the limits around him. He wanted to achieve something meaningful, to prove that his life could rise beyond excuses. Yet, every morning, when he looked at himself in the mirror, a battle began. On one side stood his fears, reminding him of past failures, whispering that it was safer to stay small. On the other side stood a tiny voice of courage, asking him, "What if you just tried once more?" This conflict grew stronger as he watched others moving ahead. His classmates earned praise, his neighbors' children seemed more successful, and even his younger friends achieved small victories. Each time, the boy felt the sting of comparison. The more he compared, the more excuses he built. "They have support, I don't. They're lucky, I'm not. They're talented, I'm ordinary." The excuses gave him comfort, but they also kept him trapped. At school, teachers often saw his potential but also his lack of effort. "You can do better if you focus," they would tell him. But focus required action, and action demanded courage. The boy wasn't sure he had any left. His family, already tired of struggles, unknowingly added more pressure. They told him to be realistic, to settle for less, to stop dreaming. Their words pierced him deeply. He loved them, but he couldn't accept a life of surrender. One evening, as he sat under the dim light of a single bulb in his small room, he felt the weight of his life pressing down harder than ever. His books lay open, untouched. His dreams seemed distant, almost impossible. For the first time, he asked himself honestly, "Am I living, or just making excuses to avoid living fully?" That question shook him. His chest grew heavy, and his eyes filled with tears. The conflict inside him had reached its peak. In that quiet night, he realized something profound: excuses had stolen more from him than failures ever could. Failures gave lessons, but excuses gave nothing. Every excuse he made was a brick in the wall between him and his dreams. The more bricks he stacked, the higher the wall grew, until he could no longer see what was on the other side. The boy now stood at a turning point. His heart raced as he thought about what life would look like if he never tried. The image was terrifying: years passing by, dreams buried under regret, and a future filled with what-ifs. For the first time, the pain of regret looked greater than the fear of action. And in that moment of inner chaos, between doubt and desire, between comfort and courage, the boy silently promised himself one thing: he would no longer let excuses define his story. The next morning, something was different. The boy woke up before sunrise, his mind still echoing with the promise he had made to himself the night before. He looked at the same books that once felt heavy with excuses, but now, they felt like tools, waiting for him to use them. His hands trembled as he opened the first page, because this was not just studying. This was his first act of defiance against the life of excuses he had carried for so long. The beginning was not easy. His old habits tried to pull him back. The voice of doubt returned often, whispering that he was wasting his time. At times, he even failed again, scoring poorly, being mocked by others, and facing the same challenges. But something inside him had shifted. Every time he fell, he reminded himself, excuses won't fix this. Action will. And slowly, step by step, he replaced excuses with effort. He started small. 1 hour of focused study each day. One physical goal, running a little farther, pushing a little harder. One personal goal, speaking with confidence, even if his voice shook. Each small action built momentum. What once felt impossible now became his daily rhythm. For the first time, he began to taste progress. As weeks passed, his results started to change. Teachers noticed his new discipline. Classmates, who once laughed at him, grew silent. Even his family began to see the difference, not through his words, but through his consistent actions. The boy no longer argued, no longer blamed, he simply worked. Slowly, the image of the lazy dreamer faded, and the picture of a determined young man emerged. Yet, the true transformation was not in his achievements, but in his mindset. He learned that action itself carried power. The act of moving forward, no matter how small, gave him energy. With each completed task, he gained belief. With each failure faced without excuse, he gained strength. The chains that excuses had built around him began to break. One day, after a series of small victories, he stood on a stage at school. He was there not as the boy who once hid behind excuses, but as someone being recognized for his hard work and resilience. The applause echoed in the hall, but inside, he smiled quietly. He knew the true victory was not the award in his hand, but the war he had won within himself. The doubters who once told him he couldn't succeed had no words now. Their silence was louder than their criticism had ever been. He didn't need to prove them wrong anymore, because his life had already become proof. And so, the boy's journey became a lesson, not just for himself, but for everyone who heard his story. He realized that excuses are endless, but opportunities are rare. He discovered that waiting for perfect conditions is just another form of delay, while taking imperfect action is what creates progress. In the end, his life was no longer defined by fear or doubt, but by courage and persistence. He had learned that success is not about never falling, it is about refusing to stay down. Excuses may comfort us for a moment, but they steal our future. Action, even the smallest step, builds the bridge to our dreams. And so the message is clear: if you wait, you lose. If you act, you grow. The boy who once lived in the shadows of excuses chose the light of action, and in doing so, he proved that anyone can transform their story. The only real question is this: will you choose excuses, or will you choose action?